I am going to beat you into the living death.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with the latest edition of the Living Death Show. As you can see, bit scaled down today. The homie Jay is doing a little bit of traveling right now, hanging out with the family. So it's a duo, me and the jack of all trades, who has mastered them all, the senior editor of Sherdog.com, also my good friend, Ben Duffy. What's up, man?
I'm doing all right. I better have mastered some trades since I'm now standing in for Jay Pettry and for our unnamed guest that I had lined up for today, forgetting that because I work third shift, when I say tomorrow, other people are thinking 2 days from now. So my apologies.
Yeah, and it's so funny too because the unnamed guest, who I'm sure we'll have this unnamed guest probably next week or something. I'm in constant contact with. So, you know, if there was any good like responsible communication between me and Ben leading up to recording today, we would have figured this out. So our fault, but it's all good. So it is a pleasure though sometimes, Ben, to just have these scaled down shows, just us two chatting. Reminds me of our days when you would fill in for me or Jason Burgos for the trenches on the old Sure Dog live chat. So here's to reminiscing as I drink my flavored sparkling water that keeps me from drinking sodas all the time. So all right, man. Let's get it cracking because UFC 278 took place this past weekend. Was it 278? Am I getting all my numbers? All the numbers are they're so confusing me now. But 278 just took place. Leon Edwards shocking the world with an incredible head kick knockout of Kamaru Usman in the final minute of their 25-minute battle. Ben, let's start with the level of surprise here. Comeback victory, a big upset from an odds maker standpoint. Where does this rank for your surprise KOs all time?
It's up there. You can't call it the biggest upset in UFC title fight history. Obviously, we're less than a year removed from Pena versus Nunes 1. I remember Holm versus Rousey. I remember Sarah versus GSP. But in terms of the actual shock in the moment, this might be number one because Edwards had really shown nothing over the course of the fight that led you to believe that he was capable of doing that to Usman, let alone that he was going to try it then. Obviously, there's a lot of hindsight kind of backlash at some of what was coming out of the UFC booth at that point. Dean Thomas, very notably, a minute or two before this thing ended, accused Edwards of having checked out, said, he's not making eye contact with his men in the corner in between rounds. That's the sign of someone who's ashamed, who's quit. That's some brutal stuff, but on some level, I agreed. Like, Edwards looked as though, if not given up, like he was kind of out of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of was like, okay, tonight's not my night. Let's survive, regroup, and come back and beat this dude the next time. That was not the case. And that's what made it so shocking. Just fifth round looked exactly like the second, third, and fourth. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he launches a knockout of the year contender, one of the cleanest head kicks you'll ever see. Obviously, you can see replays of this thing. You look at when he launches it, his head and shoulders are perfectly lined up. He's feinted the left hand to draw Usman's defense out a split second too early. Then the leg goes up and his shoulders do not shift at all. It's just not telegraphed a bit, goes upside the head. Usman is down and out. It's as shocked as I've been in a UFC title fight ever.
Yeah, I'm, we are normally very quick to jump on the commentary team for saying really terrible stuff. I mean, the combination of Daniel Cormier and Joe Rogan has led to some atrocious calls and some pretty awkward moments. But I'm not mad at them for this, even though they proved to be wrong. They were spot on in the moment, I thought. And even Dean Thomas, like, it did look like Leon Edwards checked out. It looked like he had resigned himself to surviving to see the final bell, and hoping to reassess at a later point, because this was not, the level of urgency that he showed in round 4 was almost non-existent. We obviously have to give credit to Kamaru Usman for keeping a ridiculous pace and, kind of smothering attacks and whatnot and dragging him down repeatedly. But it looked like to me throughout most of the fight, with the exception of the first round where Edwards performed very well and surprised Usman with the first takedown that he's fallen victim to in his UFC career, and taking his back and threatening with the rear naked choke. Aside from that moment, toward the end of that first round, like, he just had bits and pieces where he'd counter effectively. He'd land a good lead hook, good like 3-2 combination or something like that. Um, Edwards might, Usman might have him pressed up against the fence, and he'd find some little slick way to maneuver footwork and get the underhooks and circle out. There were moments where he did what he was supposed to do, but I think one thing that, if I'm not mistaken, it was Rogan that said, I thought was spot on. He did a lot of good things. He just didn't do enough of them at the right times up until that knockout. So I'm totally okay with the commentary on this. And as far as my level of surprise, as far as comeback victories are concerned, it's probably number one for like a pure comeback. And the only comeback I can think of that was probably wilder was Czech Congo Pat Barry, but that was nowhere near the stakes of this one, and nowhere near the level of opponent.
That was two guys that this kind of stuff happens to them.
Exactly.
This kind of stuff doesn't happen to Kamaru Usman.
Right.
Didn't.
Yeah, like, we're looking, like, when you talk about Barry Congo, like, Pat Barry had a string of very weird results in, like, the Crocop fight where he just absolutely annihilated him to the start of it. Then he breaks his hands and he breaks his foot, and then he's a shell of himself. Czech Congo has had some of the weirdest fights in MMA history repeatedly, and just odd things that have stopped his fights or slowed him down or changed the course of them. So the combination of those two on paper should be chaotic. It should be something that you can't really make sense of. Not Edwards and Usman, though, who have won a lot of very textbook decisions, and when they have had finishes, it's been very clear cut leading up to the finish. Like, there have been very few surprises in their fights. So for them to come together again, we've seen this before, and it ended up being a very textbook fight. But they come back together, and we have a level of spectacular action that just didn't happen before. So this is very, very high, if not probably number one on my list.
Absolutely. And I mean, got to give some credit. We're talking about the booth. Got to give some credit to Anik, who is often kind of the thermostatic regulator, the voice of reason here, where he was like, from what I know about Leon Edwards, I can't picture him just sitting back and acquiescing to a lopsided loss than that, like this. And he said that after Dean kind of went in on him between rounds and, before the knockout. So Anik saw something clearly that the rest of us, myself included, didn't. And that's why he's the best in the world at what he does. Absolutely.
Yeah. Anik was spot on with it. Even if it was just to balance out the obituary that was being read on air there. I mean, he did a fantastic job. That setup was so beautiful. That setup was so beautiful. I want to rewatch this fight. I'm sure I'll rewatch this fight, as the two continue competing, and I want to do a little tape study or refresh my memory or whatever the case may be. But correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, if you saw him setting up that feinted jab to get Usman to slip, how early in the fight did you see him doing that? If you can recall.
I mean, I saw it once or twice in like the second and third rounds, but nothing significant came off of it. And I don't know if he was just kind of laying that in stock to take advantage of later, or he just had wanted to launch that head kick all fight and didn't see the moment until, well, damn, I better pull the trigger now. I'm not sure which it was. I'm not ready to credit him with that deep a level of game planning. It would be suicide to base your plan to beat Kamaru Usman on saving up a nuclear missile to launch in the 5th round. That would be silliness. I just think it was the muscle memory and the opportunism of a guy that's put in thousands of hours doing this and saw the perfect opportunity and was still mentally and physically present enough in the middle of a washing to take advantage of the opportunity when it came.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, I'm kind of remembering him doing that just leading up to the actual strike, like just kind of throwing it out there. But I think at that point in the fight, especially if we bought into the idea that Leon had sort of resigned himself to just making it to see the final bell, that could just very well be just a pawing to just keep distance. Could very well just be a rangefinder to make sure that you are out of the danger zone. So from Usman's perspective, like this, Usman has done this to a lot of people to systematically break them down and wilt away at their desire to be fighters. Like this is what he thrives off of, keeping that pace and grinding them down until they don't have any resistance left in their mind or bodies. So from his perspective, that's probably what it looked like. It probably just looked like more of a spirited sort of pawing to stall. And he bites on one or two of them because, hey, just got to be sure. So he's keeping the rhythm going. And Edwards clearly picked up on that pattern and launched a nasty finish. Like, so you did mention it's a KO of the year candidate. I definitely agree with you. Where, off the top of your head, where are you going to rank this one so far?
Because of the cleanliness of the technique, like my question always is, what was at stake? Because if all I want is nasty knockouts, I'll go to World Star. 95% of those fights end in knockouts. 30% of them end in police sirens. You get knockouts to your heart's content, but it doesn't matter because it's two fat dudes in a Circle K. The stakes and how good a gift does it make? Like, just how clean is the technique? How spectacular is it? This tops it. Before this, it probably would have been Chandler on Ferguson. Just that front kick knockout, incredible gif, incredible punch face. It was a pretty high level fight, but this is the highest of high levels. We're talking about one of the top 2 pound for pound fighters in the sport getting absolutely iced. The technique could not have been cleaner. The stakes could not have been higher. It could not have been more shocking, as we just finished talking about. It's my number 1 knockout of the year.
I'm still leaning toward Chandler Ferguson, just because the difficulty of pulling off a front kick to the chin of someone with the lateral movement, like that right there is a particular level of difficulty. But I'm not mad. It's a 1A 1B argument. And oh no, we'll go back. December rolls around, we're gonna go back and dig up the archives, and we're gonna really have a list of ones that we deem as knockout of the year worthy. And maybe this is something we're totally forgetting about. That's, when we look back, is gonna top this. But that is pretty damn high up. Number 2 for me. So yeah, we're in the same ballpark there. All right, well, let's discuss a little bit about what's next here for both men, because the defeat of Kamaru Usman, who, granted, we were just a couple weeks ago, as we had discussions centered around Volkanovski's place in history, Kamaru Usman's name was coming up. Like, sure, he's pound for pound number 2 now with this defeat. Unless you want to drop him a bit lower than that, but Volkanovski clearly wins that head-up competition as of now. But as far as all-time status, are we done with Kamaru Usman as the welterweight GOAT, or is that still a thing?
It all hinges on the immediate rubber match that we're almost certain to get next. Dana White's already talking about it. He's talking about putting it in London, and really, if you don't put this in London, what the fuck is wrong with you? Yeah. Like, think of how lit London gets for, frankly, like, think of how crazy London gets for unranked fighters.
Yeah. For the most pedestrian of fight night cards.
Yeah.
And they lose their minds.
And then think of them. Yeah. So he's talking about putting this in London. What comes out of there's a whole lot of legacy at stake. That's Usman's chance to reclaim his status as the current number 1 pound for pound fighter in the sport. It's a chance to get right back on track. as you know, in the welterweight GOAT discussion. I mean, what's George St. Pierre's greatest claim to fame? A long streak of title defenses, but that wasn't his first title reign. The other important part of it is no unavenged losses during his UFC run. Usman can get right back on track and duplicate that feat against a higher standard of competition than GSP did. So it's not out of reach. Just it all depends on this upcoming fight. For Edwards, all of a sudden, now that he is 1-1 with Kamaru Usman, you look at his own resume over the last 7 years and you see it in a whole different light. All of a sudden, Edwards has a pound for pound worthy resume. You know, he's beaten a string of at least ranked fighters, you know, unbeaten for 10 straight fights, and he's now 1-1 with the guy who beat him. Oh, and that guy happens to be one of the greatest fighters of all time.
Absolutely. I'm not quite ready to close the discussion about Usman's GOAT status at welterweight, because and like you said, this is a much higher level of competition to lose to in the title defense. Like Matt Serra was coming off an Ultimate Fighter season where cast-offs were giving a chance to come back. And then we're talking about Leon Edwards, who was on a ridiculous run through one of the most competitive divisions in the sport. So yeah, I don't think we're done with that conversation, but a lot is going to depend on what this eventual rubber match is going to look like. So yeah, let's show Leon some love here. Probably not as much love as two gentlemen that previously have not had nice things to say about him. They're probably sending him thank you cards right now. Colby Covington, Jorge Masvidal. How happy are you if you're one of those two guys right now?
Oh, I think you're absolutely delighted if you're one of those guys. You know, you're Colby Covington, like looking at your new implants, your new veneers, and saying, I'm gonna, you know, keep these nice and clean for my moment in the sun. The problem is we are going to get that immediate rubber match, so it might all be for naught if Usman just dominates Edwards in the rematch and all of a sudden they're back where they were. But for a moment, there's the glimmer of hope, because Covington, obviously, okay, Saturday's fight was a minute away from over when Edwards knocked out Usman. I have a recap to do 10 minutes after that fight's over. So I'm already putting together my talking points for the Usman loses 49-46 or 49-45 discussion. My questions are, you know, has he now proven he's the greatest British wrestler in MMA history? Yes, still is. Is he the number 2 guy in the division? How does he match up against Covington, Burns, Masvidal, the rest of that top 5? All that's out the window because he won, but it's still in my mind, and it's got to be in the minds of Covington and Masvidal. Masvidal and Edwards, there's a grudge match there whenever. The UFC has on film this really raw, unrehearsed footage of Masvidal walking away from, I'm pretty sure it was Megan O'Leary, and popping dude in the face. Like, Masvidal's, he's gotten like a sneaky amount of publicity for like extracurricular punches of dudes in the face, hasn't he?
Yeah, and we know the UFC loves to put felonies on commercials, so it'd be perfect. Like, I think if you're Colby Covington, I'm thinking try to ignite as much publicity as possible in the moment, and maybe you get that shot against Leon Edwards before Usman, because I'm assuming that Usman's going to have to sit down for a little bit after a knockout like that. I'm assuming just a medical suspension alone is going to keep him sitting down for a couple months, maybe. If you can campaign for Edwards to get right back in, say he's healthy, like he's completely healthy, not coming out with any real injuries. If you can convince Edwards to go ahead and take a fight while Usman is, you know, mandated to sit on the shelf, that's probably his best hope. To just not have have his hopes relying on Edwards to repeat the job he did Saturday. What are you thinking?
Well, one, again, I was prepared to say that's the fight I want to see next. You know, assuming Edwards lost, I wanted to see Edwards versus Covington next. I think it's a fantastic fight. And if Covington can talk his way into that fight while Usman is on the shelf, go for it. I mean, this is the job. We have some breaking news.
Oh,
hey, welcome,
hey.
Jay Pettry on the road. Looks like he pulls off to the side of the road and joins us. We are talking about the possibility of Colby Covington jumping in and snatching a title shot against Edwards if Usman is on the shelf for any appreciable amount of time.
And Jay, before you answer that, I just want to point out to everyone watching,
absolutely no chance.
You are at the same rest stop that There's Something About Mary was filmed at. You're at the same rest stop where that serial killer was picked up along with the orgy. So continue, Jay.
Yeah, I won't be here long. I'm probably gonna be disappearing soon. I might get chopped down. Man, I just watched the fights last night. I said, I don't know if I can get the darn camera going. I'm gonna flip me up this way. There we go. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to stay long, but I just want to say I just caught up last night. And holy smokes, guys. Colby Covington has absolutely no chance of skipping the line there. Absolutely not. Because he's on a losing streak, if I'm not correct. And that matters. I might be getting a low reception. I'm standing in the rain. It's in a beautiful scenic Maine, by the way. Very happy to be here. There's no way that Colby Covington's going to skip the line. No amount of chatter can make him do it. Because, it's a situation we've talked about many times before. Some champions, you have to beat twice. Like when we were talking, when Ben and I were in Houston talking about John Jones, one of the questions that could have arisen was, Dominic Reyes is going to have to beat John Jones twice. And that's exactly what's going to happen for Kamaru Usman, unless he's injured and I don't know about it.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about...
That's my 2 cents. I miss you guys.
After a clean KO, some mandatory time on the shelf. I agree it's an outside long shot, but I mean, Colby Covington, this is what you were born to do. This man is Black, British, and Jamaican. You cannot get something offensive out of your mouth to get him to want this fight.
If this doesn't rile your inner MAGA senses, I don't know what else will.
Oh my gosh. It will, but I don't know if can he sell it anymore.
This is a fresh opponent. I think even style-wise, we saw Usman dominate that fight up until he got knocked out. So there is a path to victory for Covington. And he clearly has the ability to.
There is, but man, do you really want that smoke now?
Yeah, I think he does.
I think Covington thinks he can beat anyone in the world. I think Covington thinks he could have beaten Usman on Saturday night. He has, I mean, whatever may be wrong with him in that other part of his brain.
Yeah.
As a competitor, he is rock solid. Like, he is a professional and he is a smart fighter in the cage.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, yeah. And that's like I said to Ann, that's the matchup I would have been calling for if Usman had won. Like, give me Edwards versus Covington. Let's figure out who's really number 2 in this division. But yeah, I agree that it is the most outside of outside shots, but he only has to sell it to one person, Leon Edwards.
Yeah. And you know what?
No, I think he has to sell Dana.
Well, him too. Yeah. But I think I got a more likely scenario. And this one, from a competitive standpoint, makes even less sense, but screw it. Let's do it. It's our show. We can say what we want. I think Masvidal has a better shot of cutting the line. Hear me out. If we have Usman on the shelf for a little bit because he got knocked out cold or maybe an injury or whatever the case may be, if Masvidal, who still has the star power, if he can talk himself into a big fight that's going to draw some numbers and draw some attention, he comes out the winner of that. Then you have a number 1 contender who snuck out the way. Imagine if they are able to put together him versus McGregor, and he washes McGregor. He would wash him.
Okay, if that happens, yeah.
And all it would take is the UFC has a London card booked, and all of a sudden Usman can't go. They are not pulling Edwards off that card.
Yeah.
See, that's the one thing I was thinking of. They're going to go to O2 Arena because obviously we know the co-main events can be Patty against, I don't know, is Gennaro, is Lozano? They're going to put him against some 0-2 guy on the roster from Contender Series trying to fight Bruce Sub. Yeah. Oh no, Mike Jackson's fighting. Oh crud, Mike Jackson's fighting somebody. Not Valdez. It's fighting a 3-1 fighter in the UFC upcoming soon. Yeah, man, let Masvidal fight a Burns type or somebody coming off a loss. But you know what? No Shamaev. That's all I got to say. I'm out of here, boys. I love you. See you guys soon.
Like too, man. Peace.
Thanks.
Yeah. So Mike Jackson is fighting Pete Rodriguez. Yeah. Coming up in October. So, I mean, I didn't even think about. I mean, that should have been the first thing that popped in my head, like an injury leading up to the actual fight date after the rubber match has been booked. Why didn't I think about that? I'm thinking all sorts of wild scenarios. This sport has eroded my logical thinking ability.
And normally the UFC could just push the whole thing back unless they've booked something in England where they're like, we're not pulling Edwards off this card.
Right. Yeah, and that's, I mean, it has to happen in London. Other than that, the only other place where it would make sense is Lagos. You know, it's got to be London, or it's got to be, you know, Nigeria. Like that's it. And they're not making a move they're not doing an African event anytime soon that I'm aware of. So, and I'd imagine Izzy would be the headliner of that card if they were to do something. So, man, I'm thinking that we're going to get that rubber match, but if you are Colby Covington or you're Jorge Masvidal, you better be in shape. You better stay training. You better prepare your body. On strategy wise, could be a whole nother thing, because we could find Edwards injured and they have to do some sort of interim situation as well. But just stay in shape, because the call could be coming. Man, but this does open up some new possibilities in the division. Like we always talk about how a dominant champ, as much as we like to see it, it can kind of stagnate things. But we've got some electricity going on up top now. So
Definitely.
Yeah, man. Oh, before we move along to the next topic of discussion here, now you said Leon Edwards, greatest British wrestler in the UFC. Where does he rank with Jamaican fighters in the UFC? Because he is the second Jamaican champion now.
I might rank him first. Like, I think it's possible. Obviously, he just barely won the title, but he had so over-earned that shot leading into it that, again, now that he's 1-1 with Usman, it throws the whole last 7 years of his career into a different light.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I'm not prepared to answer that question. Like I honestly don't know. I mean, Aljo is clearly the credentialed wrestler, and he has repeatedly shown his grappling chops and quick rear naked choke victories and Suvalev stretches and whatnot. Like he's done his thing on the ground. But man, this is a guy who, like, we're talking about Leon Edwards, who didn't get totally out wrestled against Kamaru Usman, like one of the more dominant forces on the ground in the UFC. So
took him down cleanly and effortlessly in that first round.
Yeah. Got off the fence a couple times, like was able to get some good clinch work in. Like, yeah, man, that's a question. That's a question. I mean, Edwards is, I think, by far the more complete fighter of the two, of him and Aljo. Like he's definitely the more complete, like well put together mixed martial artist, where you don't really see a hole in his game. Because I always thought like Aljo's hands were always like lagging behind his kicking ability and his ability to get takedowns and submissions and whatnot. But man, when it comes to just purely on the ground, like I don't know if I want to answer that. It's pretty damn close, but Jamaica is doing the damn thing in the UFC. So
and over in PFL, we got Delano Taylor just knocked Rory McDonald into retirement, and he's going to fight for $1 million in a couple months.
Yeah, Are we witnessing a new hotbed of talent? It's in the Caribbean. I don't know, man. It's a beautiful.
It's always been a hotbed of boxing.
Yeah,
and maybe it's just taken MMA to catch on. Same thing that kind of happened to Mexico in the last 5 years or so.
Yeah. So definitely some interesting things. I mean, I guess a region we need to start paying attention to. So, all right, let's move things along here, because we did have quite a co-main event. Paulo Costa gets a decision over Luke Rockhold. We're definitely going to talk about Rockhold overall career, because we're laughing and joking and stuff leading up to it, but the man is a legend. He deserves his respect on that end. You know, former champion in Strikeforce and the UFC, so we got to show him some love. But this was easily one of the weirdest fights I've seen on a high level. Ben, you are a man who is a fixture at Texas regional shows. Like you You know, you've been cage side for many a local spectacle. Did this look like one of those local spectacles to you?
It absolutely did. I said on the recap, like, 45 minutes after the fight, this was like the greatest terrible fight, or the most terrible great fight I've ever seen. Like, it was super exciting in the moment. Obviously, there were huge swings of momentum. There were big moments of offense and drama. It was obviously very weird, but it was terrible. It was enjoyable the same way that Griffin versus Bonner 1 was, only 17 years later, and fighters you would think at the top levels would know better by now. But yeah, Griffin Bonner 1, by the end of the fight, it was two tired guys basically taking turns punching each other while the other had his hands down. This was that by the beginning of the second round. Like, it was a terrible fight. They were both exhausted. Each of them, it felt like, could have finished the other if he'd been just like more present. But by the middle of the second round, it's almost as though they kind of agreed to put on a show together.
Yeah.
Like, kind of like Griffin Bonner. You didn't really think anyone was getting finished after, the middle of the second round. These guys are just going to keep slugging it out and staggering. And it was dramatic. It was enjoyable. It was funny. By the end, there were some disturbing things that I'm sure we'll get to in a minute. But yeah, it was a great, terrible fight. It had no business competitively or aesthetically being on a UFC pay-per-view main card, because it was two high level fighters engaging in a regional level fight.
Yeah, it's like the highest level low level fight you could imagine.
Yep.
Like it had the regional feel to it because it felt like two very incomplete fighters in front of one another. Now, of course, the altitude has a lot to do with that. I'm not sure when Costa or Rockhold arrived in Salt Lake City, if they did any of their preparation at elevation, but we know Rockhold typically trains in Florida at sea level. Costa, I know he's had some issues as far as
now he's
training and management.
Team me now,
Yeah,
so
I don't know where that is, but it just didn't look like they prepared themselves for the altitude. So we'll give them that to an extent, but it looked so much like two guys who were trying to find themselves as fighters during this. For Rockhold, it looked like the guy who was, who excelled in Taekwondo and didn't know exactly how to translate those skills properly into a cage fight, and just had enough in him to just throw out a crazy wheel kick sometimes, or throw out a spinning back kick, or land those roundhouses here and there. And for Costa, it was like guy who won a couple of bar fights and said, "Oh yeah, I can do this. I'm tough." And they went in there and created that sloppy spectacle that we witnessed.
Completely agree. There was an obvious regression in the case of Rockhold. He looked like a guy who hadn't fought in 3 years. Costa, there's a regression even from his last couple of fights. Physically, he looked great. I mean, I said UFC 278, if they still did subtitles for their events, would be, yeah, I made weight and I look fucking good, because Costa and Rockhold and Harry Hunsucker all made weight where, there was kind of question whether they would, and they all looked like swimsuit models, relative to kind of how they usually look. But yeah, the gas tank wasn't there. There was no game planning on either guy's part, it felt like.
Right.
Like, these are two, even at their best, fighters with known flaws, but they just kind of smashed at each other like, a couple of Hot Wheels cars, being played with by a 5-year-old. I also do want to say something real quick about the altitude. I lived in Salt Lake City for 15 years. I only moved away from there most recently in 2016. I still go back every year, so I have friends, I have family there. It's about 4,000 feet, 4,500 feet, depending on where in the valley you are. It ain't Tibet. It's not even Denver. Like, it will kind of sneak up on you, if you're doing something strenuous. But there's an NBA team there. There are 2 top 25 college football teams there. Like, athletes can perform there. Just, you need to prepare for it. It's not something you can prepare for in 2 weeks. You can't change your lung capacity and the level of oxygen your body is used to getting in 2 weeks. It takes months. It takes a year. It takes growing up there. Like either prepare for it, put on the Vanderlei Silva 2006 training mask or don't, and just try to get that fight out of there in the first round. But yeah, you can't go out there and fight a war of attrition on, 2 weeks extra preparation.
Yeah, good point there. And then just as a personal note, so you guys know I went to Nairobi not that long ago, did a little Muay Thai when I was out there, and my trainer there was complimenting me for keeping up with the pace of the workout, because Nairobi is at just under 6,000 feet elevation. So hey, CM Punk, I'm at you. Yeah, so yeah, so Ben, let's before I definitely want to talk about Rockhold overall, but let's give Costa, the winner of the fight, a little bit of attention here. What do you think is his next move? What's the next thing that should happen matchup wise for Paulo?
I said this going into the fight. This is a problem for Costa because there's almost nothing he can prove in this fight. Like if he absolutely destroys the version of Luke Rockhold that walks in, we know nothing more about how he's going to look in a rematch with Israel Adesanya. We know nothing about how he's going to look against any of the top 185 pounders. There was nothing he could prove there except that he could make 185 pounds without incident, which was in doubt after the weirdness of the Vettori fight. So that's a win. He made 185. He looked great. He looked better. He had less of that. I want to talk around this delicately, but a little less of that obvious bloat walking into the cage. He looked physically as good as he had since like his first fight or two in the UFC, but that's about it. I still think his next matchup should be some sort of lateral move. Like maybe somebody like Gerald Meerschaert has earned a fight with a name as big as Paulo Costa, a former title challenger. Maybe one of the hot new names, like whether Chidi Njokuani or Gregory Rodriguez comes out victorious in their matchup next month. Maybe one of those guys can launch himself into the real top 10 by fighting Costa. I don't think Costa needs to hang around and fight a top 5 guy next.
I'm fully in agreement with that, because I didn't, go back to something that you and Jay say quite a lot. Like I didn't feel like I learned anything about Costa after this one was over. Like he's exactly who I thought he was leading up to it. He's a guy who tends to throw IQ out of the window and just start throwing shots without much rhyme or reason. So, and if he struggled like that against Rockhold, not just this version of Rockhold age wise or how depleted he is, but this version of Rockhold with zero cardio, with that constant staph infection on his shin, like just this shell of Rockhold, and he struggled like that. Yeah, we're not throwing him in front of a Jared Cannonier or anything right now. Like I'm thinking, as high profile as it would get, if we're going to go really lateral, Sean Strickland maybe. But even that might be a touch much. I'm thinking maybe like Darren Till. If we still want to have like a guy with a little name value. But that's, a guy who Till, I think safely can say, like, has kind of stalled out at middleweight. I think that'll be a good litmus test to see if Costa has anything to offer the division in the long term.
The other thing to keep in mind is that Costa's next fight, whatever it is the last fight on his current UFC deal. So there's a question of now managed by his girlfriend instead of by Waleed Ismail. Does he have enough muscle to get a final matchup that kind of keeps him in the top 10 discussion and keeps him a valuable property to the UFC? Or is he going to draw the kind of matchup that's just going to devalue him as much as possible before he takes off for Bellator?
No, that's a good point. Yeah, so we got to keep our eyes on that, man. But let's go ahead and finally get to it, man. Luke Rockhold took the gloves off. An emotional speech that he gave to Joe Rogan and the audience post fight. Clearly a legend. I don't think that's up for debate. Where do you rank Rockhold all time as far as former middleweight champions?
Bottom half of the top 10. Like he has, he was the champ. He became the champ by knocking out another one of the top, champs in their respective primes. Like he and Weidman were both in their prime when he thrashed Weidman. Like nobody can take that away from him. And he was one of the top guys in the world going all the way back to Strikeforce. So I feel as though he was one of the 5 best middleweights in the sport for a long stretch, actually made it to the top of the mountain, you know, at least once. Yeah, it's just, I mean, he was an incredibly gifted fighter. He was the harbinger of a new era in some ways. It looks normal now in, you know, the era of some of these giant dudes we have, but there was a time when he was an impossibly big middleweight. You know, he was a 6'3", 6'4" guy with a huge wingspan and long legs at a time when, you know, you either were like skinny, long Anderson Silva, or you were more of a compact, like tank type. Yeah, he was, and he brought, you know, he brought a unique mix of skills. You mentioned it, like his boxing always kind of lagged behind, but he was always a great kicker, always an underrated grappler. Yeah, he is an all-time great. He's not the greatest. He's not in the top 5, but he's got a legacy that's going to stick around for a long time.
Yeah, I think overall middleweight career, I would rank him much higher than I would as a champion. His championship run, at least in the UFC, didn't have a successful defense. And he was the victim of one of the more stunning upsets in the sport's history at UFC 199. So I think his time as champion does a great disservice to what he did overall as a middleweight, because looking at his run in the UFC leading up to him winning the belt, some of the more spectacular finishes, I mean, he had that first finish of Michael Bisping when they first fought. I want to say it was like a one-arm guillotine choke that he pulled off in that one.
One-arm guillotine from Mount.
Yeah. Just spectacular. The body kick on Costa-Philippou, who Costa-Philippou at the time was like this surging middleweight who actually left the Serra Longo camp in anticipation of him having to fight Weidman, who was then champion. He finished Lyoto Machida, and I think his defeat of Machida changed the trajectory of Machida's health and career. You know, the spectacular win over Chris Weidman to win the belt. Like, the Tim Boast was the one-arm Kimura. Forgot about that one.
Yep.
Yeah. So like, this is a guy who pulled off some very spectacular things and was very exciting to watch. But it's just when he got the belt, I think his body failed him. We saw the chin go. I mentioned the constant staph issues that he's had with his shin. I think this fight against Costa was almost the perfect sort of summation of where his career has gone wrong lately. Clearly, very clearly, as we said when we were trying to give our predictions last week, a far more skilled fighter than Paulo Costa in every arena, far more skilled. But it was a matter of his body failing him when he needed it to perform. Do you think like Rockhold without the lagging cardio has any issue absolutely wiping the floor with that version of Paulo Costa?
No, I mean, Rockhold with, you know, his known chin problems and his failure ever to really learn to guard that chin, you never completely count out someone like Costa, who, I mean, whatever his flaws may be, he can punch you in the face hard. That's what he's got. But no, I would have felt comfortably that Rockhold is better everywhere, really. Just had that one, you know, that one flaw that could be exploited. Like Luke Rockhold at his best was like the Death Star.
Yeah.
You know, as invincible as he might be, he's always got the thermal exhaust port that, you know, if you can stick the torpedo
angle the torpedo in there.
Yeah.
A wrap, son. I think, like, think about that sequence. I want to say it was in the second round where he landed like 4 body kicks in a row to Paulo Costa. Rockhold, Strikeforce days or early UFC, no one survives that. No one is just walking away from 4 direct body kicks from Luke Rockhold back to back to back. Like, that's just not happening. I think this is a case of a guy who reached that mountaintop and his body just started failing him at that point. So I hope history is kinder to Luke Rockhold than his championship reign would suggest it will be.
I agree. And just the bad taste of that last run there, we had like the 3 bad knockouts and then this kind of like weird appendix on his career, but man, he was undefeated for like 16 or 17 straight fights, where except for the one loss to 2013 TRT and Mullet Vitor.
No.
Where, I mean, Vitor was a speed bump in a lot of people's careers that year. That was the year he knocked out, like, Hendo and Rockhold, and who was the other guy that he wiped out, and he just like head kicked them all. But you know what I mean?
Bisping, yeah.
Yeah, and Bisping.
Yeah. But you know what? Like, let's look back at Rockhold's that sort of regrettable run after he lost the belt. He beats David Branch, who at the time, if I'm not mistaken, that was David Branch first coming back into the UFC after having his dual champ run in WSOF. I think he was one fight removed from WSOF when he lost to Luke Rockhold. So that's a win that looks really good.
Yes.
Yoel Romero and Jan Blachowicz, with a couple of fight cancellations in there, the rematch with Weidman that was canceled, and the fight with Robert Whitaker that ended up being canceled. He lost to Yoel Romero and Jan Blachowicz by knockout. Polish power and the craziest, just violent, insane man that has stepped foot in the cage, who's grossly unpredictable and pretty much sexually assaulted him afterward. Like, I think those are two losses that I'm not too ashamed of if I'm Luke Rockhold. And like, we've talked so much about his chin being gone, and you can say what you want about the Bisping fight, because that was Bisping, a guy not known for knocking people out, was able to knock him out cold. And I was in the building for that one, and that was very, very dramatic to see Rockhold, like, the lights shut off and him like just lay stiff for a little while. But Romero and Blachowicz, like, are we really mad that he got knocked out by those two?
No, when he walked away after the Blachowicz loss, all we knew for sure was he needed to settle on a weight class where he felt most comfortable. And yeah, it looked like he probably wasn't championship material anymore. But after the Blachowicz fight, I still would have favored him against multiple guys in the top 10 at 185 or 205. It was kind of his choice to walk away for, his own health, his dissatisfaction with his personal situation. Like, I don't think anybody ushered him out the door.
Yeah.
I mean, the UFC, I'm sure, would have been happy to give him another fight.
Yeah. So I think we might look back at Rocco once the sort of immediate memory of him slumped over the canvas and that sort of very quick fall from grace that he had. Once those memories kind of fade and we're just looking at his career overall, history might be kinder than the championship run was suggesting. I would love that, because he's certainly someone who deserves respect as one of the greats at middleweight. All right, so excuse me, another all-time great competed and lost this past Saturday. Jose Aldo losing a decision to Merab Dvalishvili. Man, Ben, you called it. This was a matchup that, had this happen when Aldo was just absolutely annihilating everyone in his path, this style would have been perfect for him. Like, this would have been flying knee territory. This would have been body shots against the cage and leg kicks and just sort of a buffet of beatdown that he would have been able to serve up. But man, times have changed. Dvalishvili, wrestling pressure, clinch work, like, he got Aldo out of his rhythm, and that's something that no one has really been able to do with any level of consistency. Even in the fights that Aldo has lost, like, hasn't been to totally take him out of his rhythm. It just, Dvalishvili, man, or is he the real deal? Is this a guy who should be trying to change camps from Aljo and get that eventual title shot?
Well, I mean, that question's been kind of answered for us. The first part of the question, his time has more than come. Now that Leon Edwards is your new welterweight champ, Merab steps right into the role of, I am now the most overdue title contender in the UFC. I have 7 straight wins. Honestly, it should be 9, because, I got a weird robbery, technical submission, and an iffy decision loss. I should have 9 wins in a row. And this is the closest any of the fights have been. Like, he has washed everybody else he's fought. And the other side of it is, he legit just said in the cage, I am never fighting this man. I owe everything I am to him. and Aljo was just standing 10 feet away, kind of smiling and nodding. Either he's just gonna slow roll it, or they know something we don't, and maybe Sterling is gonna beat Dillashaw and then move up to 145. I don't know, but he flat out said, Aljamain Sterling and this team took me in after I wasted a couple of years at camps that weren't for me, and they've made me everything I am. Like, the fight apparently is not happening. The thing about Aldo, and it's something that came to me during the fight, and I tweeted it out, and people seem to agree. The difference between 2022 Jose Aldo and 2012 Jose Aldo is that in 2012, Jose Aldo had bulletproof takedown defense, the best in the sport, maybe the best we've ever seen, but could kick your ass at the same time. In 2022, he has to choose one or the other. Like, Merab went 0 for 12 on takedown attempts. If you tell me that Jose Aldo makes someone 0 for 12 on takedown attempts, I assume that guy is dead, and that's why there wasn't a 13th try. Even as recently as UFC 200 in 2016 against Frankie Edgar. Edgar couldn't take him down. Aldo won all the rounds, and Edgar looked like he'd been in a fight at the end of that thing. Here, Merab, a weight class down, goes 0 for his takedown attempts, but he wins at least 2 of the 3 rounds, maybe all 3, and he's barely breaking a sweat. Just like Aldo, his physical gifts have regressed to the point where he can't just effortlessly no-sell your takedowns while turning his own offense on you. It took him out of his rhythm to deal with a takedown artist as persistent and as strong as Merab. I mean, that's what really took him out of it.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. You couldn't have summed that up any better. Aldo it was like he just could not step on that gas pedal because the engine kept stalling. Like it was like there was always a roadblock in front of him. He just could not get going. I mean, excellent game planning by Dvalishvili to do that and to not get so excited by the opportunity fighting a legend like Aldo and wanting to really make a statement. Like, he didn't try to make a statement. He just tried to win the fight. That was exactly the right approach. Because Aldo's still very dangerous. I mean, speaking of Aldo, man, what do we do next with him? Do we put him on that fun circuit? Like, do we finally get that Dominic Cruz fight? Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you had the opportunity to make this fight, while they were both, I mean, they're obviously not at their apex, but they're both still very good fighters. They're both still top 10 fighters, or, like Cruz maybe borderline, but they've both shown that they can hang with top 10 bantamweights.
They still beat most of the bantamweight division.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you make this fight now? It's a fascinating style matchup. Cruz is a very good takedown artist, but he's a different kind of takedown artist than Merab. Like, Cruz is hitting a quick knee tap in space. He's not just grinding you against the fence and working for a full minute to suck your legs out while you're huffing and puffing wearing his weight. It's a whole different thing. Cruz has still got that bouncy motion. Can Aldo catch him with just a single kill shot and swat him out of the air? I want to see it.
Yeah, and alternatively, the loser of Aljo Dillashaw. I like style wise where those fights can take us, especially if Aljo retains the belt. I mean, Dillashaw and Aldo, please sign me up, because there's just the name value of that, just the possibilities and all the backstory with their camps. I mean, keep in mind, Dillashaw won the title originally off of Aldo's close friend and training partner, Renan Barão. So like, there's so much history behind that, and their reigns as dominant champions kind of coinciding with one another. It would be fantastic to see that fight as well. So,
or Dillashaw and Cruz, their first fight was razor close and it was a great fight.
Right.
I'm happy to see them run it back in their current condition. Like, whatever shakes out of that, it's a good matchup.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, we keep saying it time and time again, man. This bantamweight division, no matter how you mix and match these guys, not only is it fun, but it makes sense from a competitive standpoint. So I'm all for it. All right. So, I mean, UFC 278, man. Obviously, we had to talk about those top 3 fights. Those are the fights that really warranted, isolated discussion. Overall, though, this card severely lacking in name value and relevant matches. As a card overall, now that we've seen the opening bell up into the final bell, what are your thoughts as far as this being among the other pay-per-views so far this year?
Let alone this year, on paper, this is the worst pay-per-view main card that I can remember. 5-fight main card, and literally 3 of the fights on the card had no business being on a card that we were being asked to pay $75 for. Like, Costa versus Rockhold turned into fun, wild entertainment, but on paper, it did not deserve to be there. It's a former champ versus a contender, like, skidding badly, who lost and missed weight in his last fight. Just then Lucy Pudilova versus Wu Yanan, got 2 people who are well below 500 in the UFC. And then Tyson Pedro versus Harry Hunsucker, where Pedro is an intriguing but unranked light heavyweight, and Harry Hunsucker was literally the worst heavyweight on the roster, dropping to 205 for the first time in his career, and going for 2 division worst in the UFC status by trying to become the worst light heavyweight as well. Like, these are just, it was an interesting array of fights to be asked to pay $75 for in 2022. Like, just the worst. And it delivered some entertainment, but you can't judge this strictly on entertainment value. Again, for $75, you want stakes. You want it to matter. If I just want to see crazy knockouts, I'll go to a local show where 3/4 of the fighters don't really know how to defend themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I expect better than that for money, and that's why you hold these cards to a different standard than something you're getting on cable. Bad card.
Very, very well said. I couldn't agree more. But I think we might have an upcoming contender to, I guess, I don't know, defeat or win. I don't know what we're using here, but for the worst pay-per-view card on paper, this Nate Diaz Khamzat Chimaev card that's coming up in September. Yeah, September 10th. Ugh.
September 10th is my birthday, and I'm thinking of asking for my birthday off.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
don't have to watch it.
Well, I guess Dana kind of gave you a present that way. Like, I mean, this card coming up, this looks really, really bad. Like when like the outside of the main event, Johnny Walker and Ian Kudalaba are like the highlight of the main card. Ooh, not that's the most competitively relevant fight, I would say, outside the main event, and even that is like kind of outside of the real like title picture and stuff. It's only half of it matters for the division.
Outside of the main event, who on that entire card is closest to a title shot if they win on September 10th?
Kudalaba.
And he's at least 2 more fights away, if not 3.
I mean, Irene Aldana.
Honestly, it might be Norma Dumont just because featherweight is so wide open, but that doesn't count.
Yeah, that doesn't count. That's not like a real division. So, and that's a prelim.
Yeah.
So
I mean, like, women's featherweight doesn't count. Irene Aldana and Macy Chasson are both fighting at bantamweight. If either of them was willing to fight at featherweight, they would have fought for a title already.
Yeah.
This card is a wasteland in terms of divisional relevance.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to have this discussion again. But while we're on the topic of UFC 279, just for the brief moment, and we'll just segue that into perhaps the greatest title segment in all of media history. I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons, where we share something that surprised us or ironically did not over the course of the past week. And I apologize again for forgetting to do that segment last week because we had some good stuff in the tuck. So we're going to just kind of rapid fire style, just say a couple things that surprised us over the last couple of weeks. And I'll begin with part of the card of UFC 279, because while Chimaev and Nate Diaz are the biggest stars on this card, another guy with significant name value has just been added, and that's Tony Ferguson, who will be making his welterweight debut, I believe, in the UFC. Yeah, he's never fought welterweight in the UFC, right? No, he hasn't. Yeah, against Jing Leon Lee. So I was surprised to hear that booking. Maybe not as surprised as I was to hear Robbie Lawler versus Santiago Ponzinibbio coming up pretty soon too. But 2 guys, Lawler and Ferguson, 2 guys who have rightfully have their chins questioned, who haven't exactly had the easiest go as of late, but they're being put up against two people who have a lot to prove and still might have a lot to offer the divisions in Ponzinibbio and Jingliang Li. So I'm surprised and not surprised about that matchmaking. If I'm me, I'm probably going to put Ferguson versus Lawler. I'm probably going to do something more of that vein. Two guys that are definitely headed down the same path against one another. But they are on sort of shit or get off the pot moments here. And the other side of that coin is definitely shit or get off the pot. If you're Jingliang Li or you are Santiago Ponzinibbio, you better show and prove against Tony Ferguson and Robbie Lawler, respectively. Ben, what you got?
Oh, well, I mean, one I've got is UFC 278 just passed. It was a card full of big betting favorites. I think of the 12 fights that made it into the cage, 8 of them had a minus 300 or bigger favorite on one side or the other. So pretty easy to pick those fights. I picked one upset. I picked Marcin Tybura to beat minus 325 favorite Alexander Romanov to hand him his first career loss. I won't do the whole breakdown here. If you want the specifics of the breakdown, go watch me predict it on the Sherdog preview and then watch me brag about it on the recap, because I could not have nailed this one any harder. And yeah, I'm not an analyst, but sometimes I see a matchup just really clearly in my mind. This is one of those few times. So I was not one bit surprised to see Marcin Tybura win that majority decision over Alexander Romanov. You got another one?
Yeah, this is a little more recent. This is, I think this was announced last Friday or something like that. But Carla Esparza has her first title defense for her second reign as strawweight champion against Zhang Weili. So I was surprised that she was getting another title shot. Like, I think this is showing UFC's commitment to the Chinese market. Like they're trying to give Weili another look. So I was actually very surprised by that, and part of me was kind of thinking we might do the Rose rubber match.
My guess would be that maybe they put out feelers there and Rose was not ready.
Yeah, like that's, and technically not a rubber match because she lost twice against her.
Right.
So,
but
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in all the kind of UK mania that's taken over this year, never forget that the UFC has like a 350,000 foot PI that is in Shanghai. It ain't in like Newcastle, and they have broadcast deals in China. They are still more desperate for Chinese champs and stars than British. Yeah, that's just like some fun extra, icing on the cake. They need China.
Yeah, absolutely. Got another one for me?
Yeah, I do. BKFC, we don't generally talk about it. It's generally kind of a joke. This is no exception. Everybody was shocked when BKFC managed to sign Michael Venom Page while still on Bellator roster with Bellator's blessing to fight Mike Perry, UFC cast off, ne'er-do-well, kind of clownish character. I was among those who figured that MVP was going to knock Perry's nose back into place.
Me too.
That's not how it played out. Perry won, and he won fair and square. And for a guy that, again, famously fired his whole training situation to train on his own because he didn't want to give 15% of his check to somebody, came in pretty well prepared. He made good use of his tools and what was afforded him by BKFC. The fact that MVP couldn't kick or use knees. The fact that it was a small, ring as opposed to a large octagon or large, circular Bellator cage. Just he was constantly most of that fight took place at Perry's preferred range rather than MVP's, and he won fair and square. And it was honestly a lot more fun than you would have expected it to be as well. So yeah, I'm surprised.
Yeah, definitely. I got one more too. Francis Ngannou, the heavyweight champion who has been butting heads with the UFC quite a lot, has another grievance, and this one not shocking at all. He says that he lost $1 million sponsorship opportunity due to the UFC's Crypto.com deal. We talked about when Crypto.com signed that huge deal with the UFC, and the fighters are all now wearing that logo, and they see literally none of the money involved, unless of course you do the fan vote for the best performer, and they get that Bitcoin or whatever at the end of the card. Ngannou bringing something to the table that a lot of people seem to forget when it comes to the UFC sponsorships and whatnot. The opportunities out there on the free market that the fighters lose. So he was offered a sponsorship deal with another crypto company. I'm forgetting the name right now, but when the UFC made that crypto.com deal public, his individual deal was wiped off the table, and crypto.com not a big fan of the UFC letting the fighters have sponsorships outside of there with their competitors. So this is just another way that UFC sponsorships have negatively impacted the bottom line for the fighters. I guess we can go ahead and roll that into the tirade that Dana White went on with Kevin Aioli, directed at our friend Mark Raimondi of ESPN, for writing a piece where he directly quotes something Dana White said about fighter pay not changing, and somehow that flipped into Mark being a scumbag and journalists being pieces of shit, as opposed to the person who is withholding fighter pay. So I'm not surprised by it all. It's just good to see that more people are speaking about it.
And for those who might not know, all Raimondi did was quote Dana saying that fighter pay is way higher than it was in 2016, and Raimondi pointing out that the entry-level UFC contract is still the same as it was in 2016.
Yeah, he literally pointed out facts, and he
coming out of the Contender Series, it's still 10-10.
And he directly quoted White. Like he didn't embellish anything. He didn't add a spin to it. He just quoted what he said and presented the actual facts. So if that makes us scumbags, so be it. I'll wear that hat with a big smile. All right. Any other I'm not surprised.
Last one, just because we didn't do the segment last week, so this is a little over a week old, but BJ Penn, former UFC welterweight champ, former UFC lightweight champ, all-time great in the sport. Definite, Hall of Fame type guy, famously ran for governor of Hawaii, ran on a platform that was frankly incoherent. Like it seemed to be a platform mostly made up of his own personal grievances. There was a lot of being mad about COVID isolation, even though that's kind of becoming less and less of a thing by the time the ballot went around. He lost, but he did pick up 21% of the vote. How did he pick up 21% of the vote? And I know that this was just the primary, but how did he pick up 21% of the vote? That is still hundreds of thousands of people. Like, how could anybody have listened to his speeches or read any of his campaign materials and taken him seriously? Like, it's stunning that he got that many votes. It's just inexplicable.
Or even did the slightest of Google searches to see the problematic, to put it nicely, behavior of BJ Penn over the last several years. That, excuse me, this is a man that you want that you want as your governor. And let's put this into further context. Tito Ortiz was elected city council in Huntington Beach. Yep. All right. I mean, that's about as local government as it gets. Like that's very bare bones local. He garnered just over 14% of the vote. So there were less people in Huntington Beach per capita that were okay with someone totally unqualified who mentally doesn't seem to have it all there, having a very low level position in government, but more people were willing to put BJ Penn as the governor of one of these 50 states. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
He came in second.
Yeah, that's nuts. That's absolutely nuts. All right, so we don't have UFC action this week, so that's you can breathe a little bit, unless of course you are a big fan of ONE Championship. They've got a double show this weekend, including I believe they're going to be their debut on Amazon Prime.
Yep.
Yeah. So Ben, man, any particular fights outside of the main events that you're looking forward to?
Well, they've got two events coming up on Friday. Is ONE160, just one of their typical cards. It's got two title fights at the top. Ray Yoon Ok versus Christian Lee. in a rematch for the welterweight title, then Tan Lee versus Kai Tang for the lightweight title. Both of those are great fights. I mean, it's got a lot of the best of what they have to offer. Obviously, the big attention getter is Moraes versus Johnson rematching on Saturday at ONE on Prime Video 1. I was actually out in LA. I was in LA while you were in Africa. I was going to try to, like,
yeah, we're gonna try to
hang
link
out.
up, and yeah.
But I was there for the unveiling of the ONE on Prime Video deal, and jaded as I am about kind of press hype stuff in general, and cynical as I am about some of ONE Championship stuff in particular, I left that excited for this venture. I want to see how it does. I'm excited to watch the events myself. I've always said that the things ONE Championship needs to fix if they really want to make inroads in the US are start adhering to a set of procedures and rules that will allow them to put on shows in sanctioned parts of North America, and make it so I can see their product. And if you're putting it on Prime, where I already have Prime, that's a good first step. Moraes versus Johnson, they are putting their name that has the greatest name value to US UFC fans. They're going to recognize Demetrius Johnson. So they've got that atop the card. Then they've got names that the hardcore types are going to be interested in. Marcus Buchecha Almeida, 3-0 now, one of the greatest heavyweight grapplers of all time. He is in an absolute squash match in the co-main event, as should be. I mean, they want to see this guy come out and chain 50 different submission techniques on a man, before like hitting like a heavyweight calf cutter or something. So yeah, I expect Moraes is going to beat Johnson again. Makes me sad to say that, but just Moraes is twice his size. The size differential is ridiculous, even for a guy who was undersized in all of his UFC fights at flyweight. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited for the Moraes Johnson and Buchecha fights for sure.
Yeah. I'm actually looking forward to, besides that, of course, I'm looking forward to some of the Muay Thai action. We got Rod Tang on that card. That's a very, very big name for the kickboxing world, for Muay Thai in particular. Like, I mean, legend.
And I don't know if he's the greatest Muay Thai fighter in his kind of weight range of all time, or the greatest right now. Like, I'm not a Muay Thai expert, just an appreciator, but he is one of the most fucking awesome Muay Thai guys. Like, you want aggro, you want to show some kickboxing to an MMA fan and say, this is why Muay Thai is great. You show him Rod Tang.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another name who you can put in that category as well, Liam Harrison. Especially if you like Dutch style kickboxing, like he's got a great blend of Muay Thai and Dutch style kickboxing, with those chopping leg kicks that he doesn't turn the hip over, which are fantastic to try on the bag as long as you don't jack up your knee. I'm very much looking forward to that. It's a champion versus champion fight as well. So there's definitely some good stuff on this card, and I am one of the first people to jump on a mountaintop and clown ONE Championship for some very bizarre decision making, quite frankly, just deplorable business practices and whatnot. But this is one of the few times where I'm like, yeah, they're probably onto something right here. This looks like a solid card to debut in front of a North American audience with Amazon Prime. And it's like when they went the Bleacher Report route for their previous, it was like TNT and Bleacher Report, like the Turner Sports thing, it felt lacking, because it was like, okay, to watch most of the fights, you had to get the Bleacher Report app or log onto the website, and it wasn't very user friendly. It was a very odd experience trying to just sit down and enjoy the fight. How many people have Amazon Prime right now? Like, I feel like my wife is keeping Amazon in business right now with all the stuff that gets shipped to my door every day. Like, Amazon Prime is in just about every home, it seems like now, if you've got an internet connection. So
I think they said 200 million people in North America.
Yeah, that sounds about
and that's
right.
That's not like the trillions punchline that we'll come back to sometimes, where they're talking about people that might theoretically have access to their app worldwide. That is actual, like, people in Amazon Prime households in the US.
Yeah,
and
verified data
Yeah.
saying that. So this fight is going to be accessible to a lot of people that otherwise would not have access to it, or wouldn't necessarily want to go through the foolishness of trying to get access to it. So I'm included with that, Ben. Like, I don't want to go through a bunch of foolishness to watch the fight. I just want to turn it on, and I've got Amazon Prime on my TVs and Roku's and all that stuff, and I'm a big fan of The Boys and some other their original programming. So this is going to blend right in. So I'm looking forward to that. All right, man. So I think that's going to do it for this edition of the Living Death Show. Man, without Jay, without that third voice, man, we were rocking, man. Maybe Jay is up out of here. I don't know, but he did kind of appear. So
well, but he appeared right before getting killed.
That's true.
So I think we're just getting some practice of filling the void.
Absolutely. Well, while he's over there getting his tallywhacker service at the rest stop from There's Something About Mary, we were actually talking about mixed martial arts. So, so you know what you got to do: like, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. Check out Ben for his coverage on SureDog.com coming up this week, and no UFC, but there's plenty of other fight action to discuss. Jay, I don't know how long is he on vacation? Is he?
He's on his way home now. I think
he's on his way home now. Okay,
tomorrow or the day after. Yeah.
Okay, well, check out Jay's coverage as well. So, and you can check out me not covering anything because I'm chilling. Stay beautiful, stay positive, and stay sexy. I'll see you when I see you. Peace.